For 1,000 years, the Idorian Empire has ruled the stars with an iron grip, crushing every civilization that dared resist. No foe has ever stood against their fleets and survived. When Imperial scouts discover Earth, a faster-than-light world advancing at an alarming pace, the Emperor orders an immediate strike. The humans are expected to fall like all the others, awed by first contact, lulled into trust, and then destroyed in a single blow. But Earth is not like the others. A brief, chilling transmission, "Stay away from Earth," is the first sign something is wrong. The humans seem ready. Their orbital defenses are subtle, hidden, and perfectly placed. What begins as a simple conquest spirals into a night of destruction that will shatter a 1,000-year-old empire. In one night, the hunters will become the hunted, and pride will turn to ashes in the void. The message was short. Stay away from Earth. It came across all known frequencies in perfect Idorian. The content wasn't unusual. Empires always received warnings from doomed worlds, but the source was. Earth was a primitive planet. It should not have been able to detect their cloaked ships, let alone speak in the Emperor's tongue. Prince Igit's claws clicked softly against the ancient stone floor of the war room as he paced. Each step echoed through a chamber that had witnessed the planning of 1,000 conquests. The royal palace of Gavin had been carved from a single mountain of black granite. No gaudy crystals adorned its walls, only the bones of species foolish enough to resist the Empire's expansion. He paused before one display, the complete skeleton of a Centurion war chief. They too had sent threats once. Now they existed only as a warning. Igit told himself this should comfort him, but the thought brought no peace. Something about Earth felt different. "You seem troubled, my son," came the deep, rolling voice of Emperor Aeon. From the shadows emerged the towering figure of his father, obsidian scales shimmering with faint bioluminescence. His curved horns bore etchings marking 100 victorious campaigns. The Emperor's presence filled the chamber like a storm about to break. "The humans knew we were watching," Igit said. "They shouldn't have known. That is precisely why they must be dealt with now." The Emperor stepped forward, his claws leaving faint scratches in the stone. "Our projections show them achieving interstellar travel within decades, not centuries. Their rate of advancement is unprecedented. Then why not wait until they reach space and destroy them in open combat? As tradition demands." The Emperor's tail lashed once against the floor, a sign of impatience. He activated the war table, and a perfect holographic Earth spun between them. Streams of data surrounded the image, human progress from primitive combustion engines to atomic weapons in less than a century. Information networks that doubled in capability every few cycles. "They are dangerous in ways numbers cannot capture," the Emperor growled. "They learn fast. They grow stronger from every challenge. And, they imagine." Igit frowned. "Imagine? They fill their stories with wars against unknown enemies," Aeon explained. "And in those stories, they win. They prepare for threats they have never seen, and they do so for amusement. Consider that, my son." Igit studied the data. It was true, much of human entertainment involved fictional alien invasions, interstellar battles, and humanity prevailing against impossible odds. Normally such arrogance would amuse him. Now, it unsettled him. "You understand now," the Emperor said. "We strike while we hold every advantage. You will lead the campaign, not for glory, but to prevent war before it can begin." The weight of his father's words pressed heavily on Igit's armored shoulders. His first command, and it would be a preemptive strike against a world that had yet to reach the stars. Tradition called for open battle against equals, not extermination of the unprepared. But centuries of imperial conditioning kept his posture firm. "Yes, father. How shall we proceed?" "As always," the Emperor replied. "We offer peace. And when they accept, we strike." The plan felt wrong. False peace was for prey too weak to resist, but something in Igit's instincts whispered that the humans would not follow the script. Days of War Council passed in a blur. Tactical projections. Invasion routes. Simulations of Earth's defenses crumbling. Every time he watched them fall in the simulations, Iggit found himself admiring their desperate ingenuity, their ability to adapt on the fly. Finally, the day came. From the depths of the royal palace, Emperor Aeon and Prince Iggit watched as the fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 12 massive warships gleamed in the starlight, each one carrying enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. "Observe," the Emperor said, his voice smug. "You will see how easily they welcome their doom." On the main display, past conquest recordings played, the Centurions opening spaceports in celebration. The Stellari preparing feasts. The Siran exchanging gifts, right up until the plasma cannons melted their cities. "Our appearance alone terrifies them into compliance," the Emperor said. "They will be desperate to prove themselves worthy." Iggit's neural link pulsed, a live transmission from Earth. The humans requested the fleet hold position while they sent an ambassador. The Emperor laughed, low and cruel. "As expected. They fear offending us more than they fear what we might do." Iggit's scales rippled uneasily. "Their tone is precise. Controlled. Not the panic of others." "All species have their quirks," the Emperor said dismissively. "They all fall the same way." The tactical officer's hologram flickered into being. "My Emperor, they request docking specifications to prepare for our arrival." "Send false numbers," Aeon ordered. "Let them think us lighter than we are. The surprise will be sweeter." Iggit studied the blue-white world ahead. Human orbital installations seemed scattered at random, as if placed without strategy, but something about the pattern nagged at him. The placement, the spacing. Perhaps a cautious approach, Iggit suggested. "We still don't know how they detected our scouts." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "This is not war, my son. This is pest control." The humans then invited them to conduct the first diplomatic exchange on a human orbital platform, citing environmental differences. The Emperor's scales pulsed with satisfaction. "They seek to accommodate us." A sign of submission. Iggit couldn't shake the sense that the humans were following their own plan. As the fleet closed the distance, he saw the random orbital positions shift, tiny adjustments, barely noticeable. But together, they were forming something. A web. Before he could speak, the first explosion lit the void. One of their lead ships vanished in a blinding flash. On the tactical display, the lead ship's icon blinked out. One moment it had been gliding toward the human platform, the next, it was nothing but expanding debris. "Impossible," the Emperor hissed, leaning forward on his throne. The supposed scatter of human stations and satellites revealed their true design in an instant. Each position marked a node in an interlocking web of fire. Primitive, but devastating, kinetic weapons, simple metal slugs hurled at relativistic speeds. They ignored shields entirely, tearing through holes like paper. They knew, Iggit breathed. They were ready. Silence. Aeon roared. His tail lashed the stone floor hard enough to crack it. "Deploy combat screens. Return fire." Even as the order spread, another warship vanished in a spray of molten fragments. Then another. On the display, red icons bloomed across the formation like wounds. Human platforms that had appeared to be drifting wreckage suddenly erupted with missile launches. Dozens, no, hundreds, of warheads streaked toward the Idorian ships, their courses weaving unpredictably. The neural link fed battle data directly into Iggit's mind, forcing him to feel every loss as if he were aboard the dying vessels himself. Crew screams, systems failing, bulkheads collapsing under relentless impact. The psychic echoes of death gnawed at him. "They aren't waiting for us to fire," Iggit said, forcing his voice steady. "They're executing a prepared kill sequence. Reserve fleet, jump in now," the Emperor thundered. "Crush them before they can regroup." A new voice cut across all channels. It was human, but it spoke perfect Idorian. This was your only warning. We have demonstrated a fraction of our defensive capabilities. Leave now, and we will demonstrate our offensive ones. The Emperor's bioluminescence flared in anger. Bluff. Deathworld bravado. Father. Igot interrupted sharply. They are not bluffing. On the displays, the truth was undeniable. Of the initial 12 ships, 7 were gone. 3 more were crippled. The survivors were breaking formation, desperately trying to shield themselves from overlapping fields of fire. They knew we'd come, Igot pressed. The warning wasn't to deter us, it was bait. Aeon growled, but his eyes flicked to the tactical projections. Withdraw what remains of the fleet. The Emperor had barely spoken the words when Igot's claws froze mid-gesture. His neural display flashed with hundreds of new contacts, not in the Sol system, but deep in Idorian space. Father, Igot's voice was barely a whisper. They're here. Warships, human warships, were emerging from hyperspace across the Empire's own territory. Not dozens. Hundreds. How? Aeon began, but the answer was already clear. The captured scout ship, Igot said. They took its data. Every navigational chart. Every defense grid. Alerts bloomed across the war room. Shipyards destroyed in nuclear fire. Military supply depots turned to vapor. Strategic material caches annihilated. The humans weren't simply defending Earth. They were dismantling the Idorian Empire. Signal all reserves to protect the shipyards, the Emperor roared. Activate the home defense fleet. A blinding flash lit the largest display, the Empire's primary shipyard in the Gathan system was gone. No enemy ships in orbit, no drawn-out battle. Just a precise, overwhelming strike that erased it from existence. They're not even bothering with ship-to-ship combat, Igot realized. They're erasing our ability to build more. The Emperor's claws dug furrows into his throne. Then we'll strike back at their world. Every ship, every weapon, no. Igot snapped. They're not letting us retreat for revenge. The safe departure vectors they sent. They lead straight into ambushes. As if to confirm his words, another emergency feed lit up. A returning cruiser was obliterated the moment it entered the first, safe, vector. Pride battled reason in the Emperor's expression. Better extinction than submission, he growled. You'd sacrifice the entire species for pride? Igot demanded. We can still save the civilians, scatter to the colonies, survive. They will pen us in, Aeon said flatly. Destroy our fuel, our shipyards, our armories. Reduce us to pre-industrial status. They are already doing it, Igot replied. Fresh alerts came in rapid succession. Fuel refineries struck. Antimatter plants destroyed. Yet, conspicuously, the humans avoided harming civilian cities. It wasn't mercy, it was strategy. They were cutting out the Empire's teeth while leaving the body alive, helpless. In less than an hour, the Empire had lost more infrastructure than in 10 centuries of war combined. Father, Igot tried again, his voice almost pleading, we can still choose survival. The Emperor's scales dimmed, his massive frame silhouetted against the dying glow of the tactical displays. Mercy, he said quietly, does not exist. They are not being merciful. They are being thorough. Another alert stole their attention. The humans were dismantling the long-range communication network. Soon, Imperial Command would be blind. The Emperor straightened suddenly, his horns scraping the ceiling. Order all surviving ships to converge on Earth. If we die fighting. Igot stared at him, horrified. That's madness. They've shown us what they can do, I am Emperor. The roar shook the chamber. I will not be humbled by primitives. Igot looked into his father's eyes and, for the first time, saw not the legendary conqueror of his childhood, but a creature choosing death over adaptation. "No," he said quietly. Then louder, "No," he turned and ran from the war room, the Emperor's furious shouts echoing after him. His claws hammered the stone floors as he raced through halls lined with the bones of extinct species, monuments that now seemed like warnings. Bursting into the palace's communication hub, he shoved aside startled technicians and activated the civilian emergency broadcast. "This is Prince Igit," he announced, voice steady over the pounding of his twin hearts. "Our empire has fallen. The humans have destroyed our capacity for war. My father chooses extinction. I choose survival. Any who wish to live, flee to the outer colonies. Abandon conquest. Save yourselves. The age of the Idorian Empire is over. The age of survival begins." The guards arrived as he cut the transmission, weapons ready. But hesitation was all he needed. He bolted past them, racing for the nearest landing bay. Chaos had already begun, evacuation signals blaring, civilians flooding toward transports. He boarded a colonial freighter just as its ramp closed. As the ship roared into the sky, he saw the dark sprawl of the capital receding beneath him, the palace at its heart still intact, for now. Through the viewport, Gavin shrank to a blue-green jewel, unaware that its thousand-year reign had ended in a single night. The colonial freighter's engines thundered as it climbed beyond Gavin's atmosphere. Inside, the cargo holds overflowed with civilians, soldiers who had shed their armor, children clinging to parents, merchants clutching what little they could carry. The ship's captain, a lean veteran with faded scale patterns, gave Igit a brief nod of respect. "You gave us a chance, Prince," the captain said. "Not all would have." Igit's gaze lingered on the planet below. Through his neural link, tactical feeds still streamed in from what remained of the Imperial Command Network. His father's voice echoed across military channels, ordering the remnants of the fleet into one final, concentrated strike on Earth. He could see them on the displays, a ragged, broken formation of warships accelerating toward the blue-white world. Pride was all they had left. "Father," Igit whispered. The Emperor's last transmission blazed across all frequencies. "We are the Idorian Empire. We do not submit. We do not," it cut off mid-sentence as the humans struck. There was no drawn-out battle, no glorious clash of fleets. Just cold precision. Beams of coherent light and kinetic salvos reduced the attackers to wreckage in minutes. The humans didn't even issue a surrender demand. They didn't need to. They ended it without a word, the captain said quietly, glancing at the feed. "No bargaining. No posturing. They didn't come here for war," Igit replied. "They came to end a threat." The calm officer approached, scales rippling with unease. "My prince, reports confirm human vessels are now in orbit over Gavin. They've begun precision strikes on military sites. And, they're targeting the palace." Igit turned to the viewport just in time to see it happen. Lances of light pierced the clouds over the capital. A mountain that had stood for millennia, carved into the seat of imperial power, adorned with the bones of conquered species, erupted into fire. In seconds, it was gone. The heart of the empire was ash. "Any new transmissions from them?" Igit asked. "Nothing," the officer said. "Only silence." Igit tore his gaze from the viewport and forced himself to focus on the living. "How many heeded the warning?" "Early estimates suggest 30% of our population evacuated," the officer replied. "Most headed for the outer colonies. But those colonies were built for an empire, not for survival. They lack infrastructure, industry, then we build it," Igit said, his voice hardening. "We were warriors because we chose to be, not because we had to be. We can choose to be something else." The freighter's command center was cramped, its air heavy with the scent of too many bodies in too little space. High-ranking refugees filled the room, former governors, fleet captains, engineers, each trying to coordinate the chaotic exodus. When Igit entered, they lowered their horns in respect. Not out of fear, but but because desperate hope needed someone to lead it. Plot courses beyond the galactic rim, Igot ordered. We find worlds too far and too poor for anyone else to want. Too poor, one of the military commanders spat, bitterness in every word. We were the greatest empire the galaxy had ever, and now we are refugees, Igot cut in. The humans didn't just beat us. They prepared for years, struck once, and finished us. That is what a truly great power looks like. His tail lashed once, not in anger, but in emphasis. We will rebuild. And we will remember. But we will not become them. The tactical feeds played on a secondary display, and Igot could not look away. Human fleets were moving with clockwork precision. They ignored habitable worlds and civilian zones. Every strike targeted shipyards, fuel depots, antimatter plants, weapons caches. Nothing wasted. Nothing random. It was like watching a surgeon remove a disease from a body. Send word to all surviving ships, Igot said. Those who wish to follow my father into pointless death may do so. I will lead those who wish to live. Reports trickled in over the next hours. Most surviving ships chose him. A few turned back to join the Emperor's doomed assault. The humans dealt with them quickly, granting them the warriors' deaths they sought. Then, a final transmission from Earth arrived. The humans spoke in perfect Idorian, "Your species has been contained. Remain within your designated zones and you will be left in peace. Attempt to rebuild military capability, and you will be reduced further. We are deciding whether to protect you from those you once conquered." The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. The implication was clear, the Empire was no more. They were being allowed to live, for now, only because the humans willed it. Igot moved to the viewport, the stars spilling across the blackness beyond. He saw them differently now. Not as territory to be claimed, but as possible refuge. My father called this the Emperor's last conquest, Igot said quietly. He was right. Just not in the way he thought. He turned to the navigators. Set course for the void between the spiral arms. Empty stars. Dead worlds. Places no one else wants. A small voice came from behind him, a child, barely old enough to stand on its own. And if we ever meet the humans again? Igot lowered himself until his horns were level with the child's gaze. Then we hope enough time has passed for them to forget us, or to forgive us. The freighter's engines rumbled deeper as the jump drives charged. Outside, more refugee ships assembled, battered but intact. They carried not the pride of an empire, but the humility of a people who had glimpsed extinction and chosen a different path. From the corner of his neural feed, Igot caught one last glimpse of Gavin. Human ships moved in perfect formation above it, silent and watchful. The palace was gone. The fleets were gone. The age of conquest had ended in a single night. The jump countdown reached 0. Stars stretched into streaks of light. The old empire fell away behind them. The exodus had begun. Hyperspace stretched endlessly around them, a river of distorted starlight. The colonial freighter's vibration was constant, a low hum that settled into the bones of every passenger. It was a sound of escape, but not of safety. In the days following their flight, Igot moved among the crowded decks. He found families crammed into converted storage bays, soldiers sleeping against bulkheads, engineers working with stripped parts from whatever they could salvage. Gone were the immaculate halls of the royal palace, the polished armor, the rigid ceremony of the empire. Here, survival stripped everyone bare. Each time he passed a viewport, he saw other refugee ships trailing in loose formation. Some were cargo haulers converted into transports, others were decommissioned patrol craft hastily refitted for long voyages. They were an exodus without a destination, just a direction, away. In the command center, reports came in from across the exiled fleet. Outer colony worlds were receiving survivors, but they were unprepared. Food stores were limited. Medical facilities inadequate. Without the Empire's supply lines, their economies were collapsing in days. "We can't spread ourselves too thin," said Captain Sarah, the freighter's commander. Her scales bore the scars of 3 campaigns, and now, the weight of this one. "We need a single rally point. Somewhere defensible." "A fortress," one of the former admirals scoffed. "We just lost our entire war machine. Against the humans, there is no such thing." "Not a fortress," Igot said, stepping into the conversation. "A seed. Somewhere to grow from." The room quieted. He moved to the navigation table, activating a holographic projection of the galactic map. His claw traced a path toward the dark gaps between the spiral arms. "There are systems here, resource-poor, unstable orbits, irregular asteroid belts. No trade routes pass within 50 light-years. No one wants them." "They might not sustain us," Sarah said. "They might sustain enough," Igot countered. "Long enough to adapt. Long enough to become small." The Admiral's horns tilted in disbelief. "You want us to hide?" "I want us to live," Igot said, locking eyes with him. "We cannot rebuild the Empire. Not now. The humans have seen to that. But we can survive." By the 4th day, the full extent of the humans' campaign became clear. Tactical feeds from scouts painted a picture of meticulous annihilation. Human strike groups moved through Idorian space like a cold wind, silent and unstoppable. They did not occupy worlds. They did not broadcast propaganda. They simply erased anything that could build or supply a warship. Shipyards, gone. Antimatter refineries, vaporized. Weapons foundries, leveled. But habitable worlds remained untouched. Civilian spaceports still functioned. Orbital farms still fed their populations. It was a kind of containment that was almost worse than conquest. The Idorians were not enslaved, only crippled. "They're not here to rule us," Igot told the Council of Ship Captains. "They're here to make sure we can never threaten them again." "And they're succeeding," Sarah added. "Every scout report confirms it." On the 7th day, a new human transmission arrived. It was short, delivered across all civilian and military frequencies in perfect Idorian, containment complete. "Remain within assigned zones and you will be left in peace. Attempt to rebuild military capacity, and further reduction will follow. This is your only warning." The words landed like a physical blow. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Idorians were not the arbiters of their own destiny. The next council meeting was tense. Former governors and admirals argued over strategy. Some wanted to negotiate with the humans, to plead for protected status. Others wanted to plan a secret rebuilding effort, convinced they could outweak containment. Still others, too many, wanted to scatter into deep space without coordination. Igot listened, then spoke. "You're all thinking like this is still the Empire. It isn't. The Empire is gone. We are not an army. We are not rulers. We are refugees. If we keep thinking like conquerors, we will die like them." A heavy silence fell. Sarah broke it. "Then what are we?" "We are survivors," Igot said. "Our children will grow up never knowing the palace halls or the war fleets. And that's good. Because if they do not dream of conquest, they will not repeat our mistakes." Some heads lowered in reluctant agreement. Others remained stiff with pride, but none openly challenged him. Days turned into weeks in hyperspace. The fleet skirted the edge of mapped space, taking long jumps to avoid known trade lanes. The refugee convoy grew as more ships slipped away from Imperial territory, ignoring the last commands of the Emperor, commands that now carried no weight beyond the range of his ruined throne. Through his neural link, Igot kept watch on the galactic feeds. What he saw hardened his resolve. The humans were already fading from Imperial space. Their fleets came and went with surgical precision, leaving behind only the certainty that they could return at any moment. "They're leaving," one of the young officers asked when Igot shared the observation. "They've done what they came to do," Igot replied. "They don't need to stay. Fear will do the rest." 3 weeks into their flight, the refugee fleet reached the unclaimed system Igot had chosen, a dim star with 3 barren worlds, a scattered asteroid field, and no strategic value to anyone. Perfect. The landing was rough. The ship's inertial dampener strained against unstable gravity wells. Atmospheric entries scorched hulls and buckled landing struts. But by the end of the day, Idorian feet touched alien soil not as conquerors, but as settlers. The first settlements were nothing more than prefabricated shelters and repurposed cargo containers. Engineers set up solar arrays. Farmers began testing the soil, grimacing at its poor fertility. Everything was harder here. And yet, there was something cleansing about it. For the first time in his life, Igot saw his people working together without rank, without ceremony. Former governors unloaded crates alongside soldiers. Engineers taught children to assemble water filters. Pride shifted, not the pride of dominion, but the pride of survival. One evening, as the twin moons of the barren world rose, Sarah approached Igot at the edge of the settlement. "They're saying you should take the emperor's title," she said. "I don't want it," Igot replied, eyes on the horizon. "An emperor commands an empire. I lead a people who no longer have one." "Then what are you?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "A reminder. That we were great once, and that greatness nearly killed us." Above them, the stars shimmered. Somewhere out there, the humans still watched. Whether they judged or simply monitored, Igot couldn't know. But he intended to make sure that if the day ever came when their paths crossed again, the humans would not see the Idorians as a threat. They would see them as something else entirely. The settlement was weeks old when the final message came. It arrived without warning, transmitted in perfect Idorian, carried on a frequency no civilian system should have been able to receive. "We are aware of your exodus. You have chosen not to resist. You have chosen life over conquest. Remain on your chosen worlds and you will not be pursued. We will continue to monitor you. If you rebuild a military fleet, we will return. No threats. No demands for tribute. No promise of alliance. Just the terms, simple, unyielding, and final." The Council of Settlers met in the half-finished structure that served as their hull. The walls were bare metal, still smelling of plasma welders. Igot stood at the head of the chamber as the message played again for all to hear. Sarah was the first to break the silence. "They could have erased us completely. Why didn't they?" "They don't need to," Igot said. "We are no longer a threat. That's all they wanted." One of the former admirals leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And you trust that? That they will leave us alone if we do nothing?" "I don't trust them," Igot replied plainly. "But I believe them. And I believe that if we test them, they will not hesitate." A murmur rippled through the room, some in agreement, others unwilling to let go of the idea that they might one day return to power. After the meeting, Igot walked through the settlement. He saw children chasing each other between prefab shelters. Farmers bent over poor soil, coaxing it into life. Engineers worked on solar arrays that hummed faintly in the cold evening air. This was not the empire. And that was the point. He reached the edge of the settlement, where the land fell away into a jagged canyon. From here, the twin moons cast silver light over the rough terrain. It was harsh, empty, and beautiful in a way no imperial world had ever been. There was no conquest here. Only survival. Sarah joined him, carrying a datapad. "We've finished the population tally," she said. "Between the ships here and the outer colonies that followed our course, we have about 3 million. Igot's horns lowered slightly. "Less than I hoped. More than I feared." "They'll look to you," Sarah said. He didn't answer immediately. The title Emperor still tasted like ash. "I'll lead them," he said at last. "But not as an emperor. That title is a reminder of the arrogance that nearly destroyed us." Weeks turned into months. The settlement spread slowly, built from scavenged parts and whatever the colonists could mine from the barren soil. They had no fleet to defend them, no army to enforce their will. And yet, there was peace. The humans did not return. But their presence was still felt, in the way every captain triple-checked navigational charts before leaving orbit, in the way no one spoke too loudly of rebuilding warships, in the way every message sent beyond the system was crafted with care. One evening, a group of young settlers gathered around Igit as he repaired a damaged water recycler. One of them, a boy no older than 10 cycles, asked the question that had been circling for months. "Why did they let us go?" Igit set down his tools and looked at the boy. "Because we showed them something they didn't expect." "What's that?" the boy asked. "That we could learn," Igit said. "That we could change. They came ready to destroy us completely. But when given the chance, some of us chose another path." The boy tilted his head. "Will they ever trust us?" Igit glanced up at the stars. "Trust is built over lifetimes. Maybe over generations. If they remember us as conquerors, then no. But if our children and their children never give them reason to fear, maybe one day." In the second month of settlement, a freighter arrived from one of the farther refugee groups. They carried little in the way of supplies, but their arrival brought news: the humans had completed their dismantling of the Empire's military infrastructure. Every shipyard, every armory, every fueling station, gone. But civilian worlds had been left untouched, their people free to live, so long as they obeyed the terms. "It's over," the freighter captain said simply. "The Idorian Empire is finished." No one argued. There was nothing left to argue about. By the third month, the settlement had its first crop harvest, meager, but enough to mark a turning point. That night, they held a gathering under the open sky. Fires burned in metal drums. Food was shared. Laughter rose into the thin air. Igit stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. Pride stirred in him, not the pride of conquest, but the pride of seeing his people adapt. Sarah approached, offering him a cup of water. "It's not the palace," she said, nodding to the makeshift celebration. "It's better," Igit said. Later that night, when most of the settlement had gone to sleep, Igit found himself walking alone toward the comm station. It was little more than a reinforced shack, its equipment cobbled together from scavenged parts. The lone operator looked up as he entered. "Any activity?" Igit asked. "Nothing unusual," the operator said. "Though," he hesitated. "We still pick up faint signals. Far away. Could be human patrols." Igit nodded slowly. "Let them watch. If they see we are no threat, they'll have no reason to return." On the 93rd day of settlement, a private transmission arrived for Igit. No voice accompanied it, only a line of text, translated perfectly into Idorian script. "We remember what you chose." He read it twice. There was no source identifier, no proof it was from the humans. But in his hearts, he knew. He stared at the words for a long time before sending a single reply. "So will we." Years later, when the first generation of children born in exile began asking about the Empire, Igit told them the truth. He told them about the 1,000 years of conquest, about the warning Earth had sent, about the night the humans emerged from nowhere to shatter everything. And he told them about the choice. "Some stayed and died," he said. "Others fled. We chose to live. And that choice is why you are here." The children would listen with wide eyes, then run off to play, their laughter echoing across the settlement. They did not understand the weight of what had been lost. That was fine. One day, they would. For now, it was enough that they understood what mattered most, not power, not conquest, but the will to survive. On the anniversary of the Exodus, Igit stood once more at the canyon's edge, watching the moons rise over the settlement. Sarah joined him, her scales touched with silver from the years. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" she asked. "Maybe," Igot said. "But if they do, I hope it's not for war. And if it is?" He looked at the stars, cold, endless, and full of memory. "Then we'll face it as we are now. Not as an empire. As survivors." The wind carried their words away into the night. Above, the stars burned on, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires. Somewhere, far beyond those stars, the humans still watched. And for the first time in Idorian history, that thought brought not fear, but resolve.